Hi everyone, my name's Kristen and I am your moderator for this session. This session is being recorded. Please stay muted unless, or I'm not sure if we're raising hands or if you guys want people just to jump out, if that's okay with you guys, and unmute. And I'll keep an eye on the chat for you guys. And I'd like to welcome Elin O'Hara Goya and Kim Mccoy Coleman. And this session is There's No Crying Allowed at the Reference Desk. Welcome. Go right ahead. Get started.
Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm just going to briefly introduce myself, and then I'll let my my co-presenter introduce herself. My name is Elin O'Hara Gagne. I'm the Assistant Library Director at SUNY Plattsburgh. In addition to my MLS degree, I have a master's degree in counseling. And so, as you might imagine, marrying library science and counseling together doesn't automatically seem like a no-brainer of a meld of subject matter. However, I find it extremely useful having that counseling experience in order to deal with students at the reference desk, who, as you might imagine, through your experiences, come fraught with emotion oftentimes when they're approaching a librarian for help, particularly because they approach the reference desk typically when they're under a great deal of academic stress. And for students these days who have quite a bit of academic stress, I don't want to say probably, but they may be dealing with other stressors in their lives that we need to be sensitive to as librarians. So that being said, that's sort of my background as to how I've approached the subject matter. I'm going to ask my co-presenter Kim to introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Elin, for that. My name is Kim Mccoy Coleman. I am a social worker, an art therapist, and an assistant professor of social work at SUNY Plattsburgh. I've had the pleasure of working with Elin for the past several years, closely within the social work department. And I'm also director of the BSW program. I find that I'm having a growing interest in the nexus of social work and librarianship. I think presents a really unique opportunity to come together our two fields. So I'm really happy to be here today. I will be playing an anxious student, which is very familiar to me. So it's my pleasure to be here. Enjoy.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Kim. Thank you. So why I've heard many librarians argue that they're not working at the reference desk, or we call it the research help desk at SUNY Plattsburgh. They're not there to handhold students. That any attempt to emotionally defuse or unload a situation is not in the scope of our librarian practice. My argument, however, is that we're the perfect people to defuse that sort of tension with students, particularly because the latest set of mental health statistics released by the American College Health Association shows that roughly 1/4 of our students have been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder that interferes with their academic performance. And about 1 in 5-ish students have a diagnosed depressive disorder that interferes with their academic performance. So, when I think about our mandate as librarians, I think about the fact that mental illness has been shown repeatedly to interfere with student success. And in our current budget climate, where we're constantly seeking to demonstrate our importance to campus communities and keep our librarian lines intact, anything that's going to increase student retention through increased student success is worth giving a shot. I'd also argue that it's our responsibility as members of the campus community to help students, particularly if we see another human being in crisis. And second of all, thirdly, I should say, when students are experiencing stressors on top of other stressors on top of other stressors, sometimes it becomes a liability issue for the college if we're aware that there's a problem and we don't act. So I would argue that there's a number of reasons that we should attempt at least to utilize new strategies working with students at the reference desk. And I call that sort of suite of strategies enhanced reference. That's just sort of my little phrase. I'm curious, there's a lot of faces in this session, and I'm curious what you're seeing at your reference desk that's made you come to this session. So feel free to just speak out. Anyone?
I guess I'll fill the silence. I noticed that students come, and I read an article a couple of years ago about the role of shame in library anxiety. And I think it was in college and research libraries. I'll put the link in there. And that really changed my thinking around how to interact with students. And it helped me position their anxiety as coming from a place of shame rather than just being stressed out. And I've had so many more positive interactions if I assume they're coming to me from a place of shame and that they're embarrassed that they even have to ask for help.
Yes. Logan, I am so glad you mentioned that, because one of the things that I'm going to talk about a little bit later in this workshop is cognitive distortions, which are essentially sort of maladaptive thought processes or patterns that we use in our brains that frame our relationships to other people and the events in our lives. And that shame is born out of those cognitive distortions, like, oh, I have to ask for help, thus I'm bad, thus I'm a failure, thinking such as that. Oh, I see. And Logan, I see the link that you put in the chat box. Thank you.
Can I just add something real quick, Elin?
Go right ahead, Kim.
I'm really pleased to have your comment, Logan, but I'm sure many of you are already familiar with the work of Brene Brown. She's become somewhat of a pop culture icon, and she's a clinical social worker, and her area of expertise is on shame and resilience. So if this is an area that you want to explore from a social work perspective with broad applicability, you might want to look up some of her texts. They're extremely popular. She's got a lot of videos online, but it's a really great point. So thank you, Logan, for that.
I love Brene Brown. I listen to her podcast quite a bit. And just because we're librarians, and Kim knows that my current favorite book is the book I'm about to encourage all of you to read, particularly the women here, you must read Glennon Doyle's book, Untamed. So that being said, okay, so our plan for the next about an hour is we're going to review some enhanced reference strategies that you can use. Oh, yay! Kristen said best book. Awesome, Kristen. I knew I liked you. We're going to go over some of the enhanced reference strategies. I'm going to use the breakout rooms to partner you up to practice. And then at the end, I'm going to leave roughly 10-15 minutes for questions. I am also going to, in the chat box, paste a link to the handout for this session. I'm not a huge fan of PowerPoints, so I'm not using that feature. So as soon as I can get that link, which somehow disappeared on me, copy, give me one moment. Okay, this should do it. Okay, so the link to the handout is in the chat box. Okay, so I, just to frame the discussion, I'm going to talk about the 3 R's, which is recognize, respond, and refer. So what do I mean by recognize? Well, most students, although there's some exceptions, most students will come to the reference desk and they will not disclose that they have a specific diagnosis. So I don't know if anybody can, someone asked for the book title again. It's Untamed by Glennon Doyle. Kim, would you mind typing that in the chat box? Thank you. So when students don't disclose specific diagnoses, you have to pay attention to your intuition. So, I mean, we're all presumably somewhat people, or else we wouldn't be working as reference librarians. When I'm highly anxious, it is likely that, you know, the friend that I'm spending time with is going to pick up on that anxiety. We as human creatures tend to monitor other people's reactions because from an evolutionary psychology standpoint, it behooved us to do that. So if you're feeling unsettled, perhaps opposite a student, it's probably because, or maybe because that student is also unsettled. So pay attention to your intuition is my first suggestion. But there are other signs of distress that you can pay attention to. So pay attention to what we call the student's nonverbals. Does the student kind of seem out of it or confused beyond a typical level of confusion in students at the reference desk? Do they appear fearful or particularly stressed? Are they doing the nonverbals like the hand wringing or the cuticle picking? Slamming their pencil down repeatedly on the desktop? Are they tapping their foot excessively? Or maybe there are some verbal signs that you're noticing, like when people are anxious or sometimes when they're manic, their rate of speech may be fast. I've noticed students who tend to be highly anxious jump from topic to topic quite a bit and have a sort of what we call disorganized thinking, where the train of thought just doesn't seem right. They may, and this is a common one, they may repeatedly ask for clarification or questions. And they may just verbalize certain perfectionistic traits like, oh man, I've got to do this perfectly or else. So anything followed by the phrase or else is kind of perfectionistic thinking. So one last thing before we get into the specific response strategies is, does anybody here have colleagues who aren't, let's say they don't naturally exude sort of warm and fuzzy vibes? And no judgment, we all have these colleagues. I'm not gonna wait for people to raise their hands or anything, but presumably right now you are picking picturing that non-warm and fuzzy colleague in your brain. Now, I don't want you to remember that person's face right now. If that non-warm and fuzzy colleague that you're picturing in your brain right now tried to do strategies with students, do you think that the students would think that they were believable? Or would it seem like a put on? Or forced or fake? You don't have to answer, I'm throwing that out there. If you aren't naturally warm and fuzzy, only do what makes you feel comfortable. Because if a student suspects that you're not being genuine with them, that you're forcing something, you have lost all chance to intervene effectively. I see a question from Holly. So neurodiverse students are, I've decided to leave out of the umbrella of emotional disorders that I'm talking about right now, because that's an entirely separate conference presentation. But if you suspect, and this is I'm going to give you this tip later on, but I'll tell you now, if you suspect a student is neurodiverse and in stress, ask them. Say, hey, it feels to me right now like you're feeling pretty uncomfortable. Do you want to talk about that? Is there anything that I can do to make you feel more comfortable? And we call that in counseling, we call that using immediacy. When you're picking up on something in the moment, ask, because that's the way we can be responsive to students in the moment, rather than doing our, what we've been trained to as librarians to do, the formal perfect reference interview. In fact, the formal perfect reference interview, I think is quite outdated, and we need to update in response to the sort of stressors that students these days are facing. Oh, the part A, part B, part C, Holly Chambers, that we learn about in library school, like step A, clarify the assignments. Oh, wait, Kristen, I always say you never know what happened before they came to the desk. Yes, Kristen. Yes, absolutely. A lot of the time students, Kristen, I'll just add to that. A lot of the time students have particular stressors that have led them to the reference desk. So they may even naturally be in a slightly more anxious state when they come to us than other students. Okay, so authenticity is absolutely key. Pick and choose enhanced reference strategies on a case-by-case basis, because there's no one size fits all approach to students, just like there's no one size fits all approach to our work, right? And all of this takes practice. So maybe if one particular strategy resonates with you, work in a little practice every now and then when the opportunity arises. You don't have to do this with every student in every situation. Okay, so strategy number one, I'm going to dive right in. Strategy one is to figure out who the student needs you to be in that moment. So as a counselor, my specialty is almost, I don't want to use the word reparenting, but acting as the mom that the client that I'm working with didn't get. So in that moment, even though it sounds like a joke, I really am momming up my clients and sometimes momming up my students. I'm not going to bore you with the theory behind this, but it is a legit counseling theory called object relations. So who does the student need me to be in that moment to deliver the information to them that they're going to receive more effectively? So it's not only what the student needs from me as a librarian, but who they need me to be in that moment. For instance, I often get very anxious. I will just throw this right out there. I have what's called generalized anxiety disorder. So my natural inclination is to second guess myself all the time. So my friends who know me know that when I'm anxious, I need to be mommed up like my clients, right? Kim, we all need sort of the cheerleader or the nurse or the mom or the teacher or the person they can vent to or the quasi yoga instructor. We all need that in response. So Kim, I'm going to ask you to jump in here and pretend to be my student at the reference desk.
Sure. Hi, Professor O'Hara-Gagne. I have this paper due tomorrow and I need your help with it. I don't even know where to start. I feel like a deer in headlights. I can't believe I did this to myself. I left it to the last minute. I do this to myself all the time. I have no idea why. I'm just, I don't even know where to start. I couldn't sleep last night. I have like 2 hours sleep maybe, and my mind is scattered and I don't even, can you help me in any way? I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't have done this.
Absolutely, we can help you. The first thing that we're going to do is you seem very anxious and stressed right now. So we're just going to take a breath together. Good. And I can assure you as a librarian that we are going to get the information that you need and we're going to figure out a plan together. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So So in that moment, there's a couple things that I saw with my eyes that Kim, my student, was anxious. You could hear the distress in her voice. So we want to meet her stressed voice with a very calming, sort of nurturing tone. I was nodding. That's in counseling, we call that an encourager, because it encourages the student to keep talking about what's going on. And it also, it's nurturing to see someone just go, yeah, yeah, it's really stressful when things like that happen. So in that scenario, the student doesn't need a cheerleader to be like, yeah, you can do it. Like, we're not matching the student's level of distress there with a role that is going to calm them down and take out some of the noise around the student. So in that, who was I to the student? What was effective? What kind of person did I need to be to that anxious student? Anybody want to use the chat box or just say?
I think you started out yoga.
Yes. Yep. I started out yoga to diffuse some of the tension. I love it. And then I moved into sort of calming mom. How about I'm gonna switch with Kim for a second. Yes, Cynthia just put in the box, the student used a lot of self-criticism. When we get to the section on cognitive distortions, that is exactly what I would do, right? I would say to the student, you know what, you seem very frustrated and anxious and hopeless, but the very fact that you came here to the reference desk means that you're doing something right. Right? So I'm seeking to reframe the self-criticism that they're using. Molly wrote, do you think it's better to say, I see that you're anxious, or just say, oh gosh, this is tough. You're in the right place. You know, Molly, you're right. You could just say, oh gosh, you know, what you're going through is really tough, and don't worry about it. But the next strategy that I'm going to give you, and I'm going to come back to you, Molly, is something called reflection of feeling. And I'll explain why restating the feeling words or stating the feelings that I'm getting emanating from the student can be helpful. Yes, Carrie, I know, I like your Carrie wrote, I like how you praise the student's good choice to ask for help. So that's another strategy that we're going to talk about shortly. Every single student that comes to the research help desk, because as Logan said, is probably feeling ashamed about having to ask for help. Anything that you can do to normalize their experience of coming to the reference desk with that shame and embarrassment is great. Like, or find one positive thing that the student has presented in the course of the reference transaction and compliment them on it in an authentic kind of way. Because again, you don't want it to come off as really fake, but we'll get to that strategy shortly too. So let's say a student comes to the reference desk and is like, oh, I can't do this. I know I can't do this. I never have the strengths. You know, I put it off. I'm a terrible student because I'm such a procrastinator. I don't think I can do this. Who do they need? Do they need a mom, a yoga instructor? Do they need a cheerleader? What do you think? And somebody want to type in? Yes, supportive friend. Yes, absolutely. That would work. All three. Molly, yes. Carrie, oh, you literally took the words out of my mouth, Carrie. Yeah, someone who has confidence, they can do it, kind of like a cheerleader, right? You can do this. I know you can. You've come to the reference desk, you came to the right place, you're asking for help. These are all extremely positive things. So you try to cheerlead them up and give them some of that confidence, just to give them a little boost, hopefully early on in the reference transaction. Can I, am I breaking people? I'm going to ask Kristen, the the co-host. Am I going to break them up into two groups now? Is that something I can do?
I spoke with Jocelyn. We believe you have the ability to do that. If not, Jocelyn is ready to step in.
Okay, so
Yep. Do you see the breakout button on your control panel? If not, then I will.
I do not.
Okay. How many breakout rooms would you like?
How many people are there?
There's a total of 46 in the room.
Wow.
40.
Okay.
Excuse me.
All right. So can we do 4 people in each room? So that makes what we'll need 11 rooms ish.
Okay. All right. I'll do 10. All right.
Okay.
So,
So I'm going to give everyone a couple minutes in a breakout room. One person should practice being the anxious or self-doubting or angry or dithering student. And then the other people can take turns figuring out in that, based on what the person says, who do they need you to be, and respond accordingly. Okay?
and do they have some sort of script? Or are they going to just make up?
Nope, make it up. Because impersonate all of the students that you're going to recall coming to the reference desk, just racked with some sort of emotion.
All right. Breakout will be starting soon.
Thank you.
Hey, Jocelyn.
Yeah.
She asked if we can end the rooms. I didn't have the ability to do that.
Sure. It's actually on a countdown right now, so it's going to be less than a minute now.
Perfect.
Can you put me back into my breakout room if that's possible? I clicked the thing by mistake.
Okay. Let's see. Josh.
I think I was in 4.
Sorry, it's not allowing me to, since they're about to close, to reassign. Sorry.
No problem.
Sorry, Josh.
I was about to share like my thoughts.
Oh, no.
You want to share with everybody, Josh?
No,
We're listening.
that's a good way to distress a librarian.
Yeah, I figured.
How do you distress a librarian? Came in on the tail of that.
Put them on the spot. That's how you
Put him on the
distress.
spot.
Oh, I thought it was de-stressing the librarian, in which case it's going to say alcohol. But okay.
Distress. Yeah.
All right, I think everyone's back over.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So there was some interesting discussion in the group that I just came from about how oftentimes our quest to pack in those teachable moments can interfere with the relationship you're building with the student. We're so used to trying to get those teachable moments and make it the perfect reference transaction. I would just abandon that I don't want to say abandon. I would de-emphasize the attempt to pack in those teachable moments, because more often than not, students really hate those, essentially. I would rather build that, like, a relationship with a student by helping the student know that I'm there to support them, and that I'm, gonna help them get their work done, but like in a way that's approachable and safe. I mean, I'd rather have them come away with that than, 3 teachable moments. Okay, strategy number 2, reflection of feeling. Yes, Carrie wrote, get them comfortable enough so that they come back when they need us again. That's exactly right, Carrie. Because that's what we want them to do, is come back. And if you start building relationships with students, you will find that you will have a crowd which can be a double-edged sword, actually. Sometimes you get students who become too dependent on your help, and that's yet another separate conference presentation. But you'll start to have sort of your crowd of librarian devotees because they find you approachable and supportive and empathetic. Okay, so back to strategy 2. So strategy 2 is called reflection of feeling. A reflection of feeling is actually the cornerstone of what counselors use in counseling. It's the first skill that we learn in grad school and in the counseling program. Basically, a reflection of feeling is just based on what you're hearing them say, seeing them, how they're behaving. Put yourself in their shoes and then just state back what they're feeling again in that moment. So we're using immediacy again. In that moment, we're just going to name the feeling that the students are giving off. And why do we want to do that? Why do we want to put a name to what the students seem to be feeling? Any guesses?
To help put boundaries around what that feeling might be.
Yeah, exactly. When we name a feeling, exactly. John wrote to identify with them. That's exactly right. When we validate the feelings that they're having and we name them, students feel seen and they feel heard and they feel acknowledged. And Logan just wrote, and if we can name the feeling, they can cope with that feeling. And that's what we're here essentially to do. So, Kim, could you do your best impression of, a catastrophizing student or someone who's overwhelmed or?
Sure.
Yeah.
Hi, Elin. I have this paper due tomorrow, and if I don't get it done, I'm going to fail this class. I already asked for an extension. I don't even think I'm just going to fail the class. I might even fail the whole semester. I don't even know where to start. I should have taken 12 credits a semester. I am in such trouble. I can't believe it. I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. I got to get this done by tomorrow.
You're feeling really stressed. I can tell. And with all the demands on your time, of course you're going to be overwhelmed. I mean, it's finals week and you've got all these classes and all this work that you're handling, but we are going to come up with a plan. Okay. Okay. So I basically just named the feeling that she was giving off based on the information she also imparted verbally. And then I followed it up with some reassurance that we were going to come up with a plan. So essentially acknowledging the student's feelings in that moment alleviates the emotional impediments that get in the way of the reference transaction. You could even, you don't want to jump right into giving sort of solutions right off the bat. Maybe take a minute or two just to, with the student to explore, how their day's going. Kim, what were you doing before you came to the library? How was your day going?
It's just been overwhelming. I don't know. I feel like I'm walking in circles. I get started and then I can't move forward, and all I can focus on is this, and I'm losing time. And now it's 5 o'clock and this thing is due tomorrow.
So you are managing a lot of stressors right now. And so it stands to reason that you're feeling overwhelmed with all the demands on your time. I think anyone would be overwhelmed in your situation. So in that case, again, I followed up naming Kim's feelings with just normalizing the student's experience of what's happening. Because more often than not, the questions that the student has or the feelings that the students presented with at the reference desk are ones that we've seen 1,000 times before. But students honestly believe, because of their cognitive distortions, that they're the only ones who are experiencing that stressor or that crisis. So dispelling the myth that they're the only ones who are somehow failing is absolutely critical. And that's the perfect lead in to the next strategy, which is authentic encouragement. So because, again, the students are the first people to be to consider themselves failing or to be hard on themselves, it's really important to be strengths focused, to provide positive feedback and to provide reassurance. So in the example that Kim gave me, I provided reassurance that they weren't the only students to be in that position, and that you could say something like, I see a lot of students who come to the reference desk within the same sort of position, and I'm going to do for you what I do for those students. We're going to come up with a plan, and so when you leave here, you're going to have the steps written down that you need to take in order to get this assignment done. So another strategy that you could use under the sort of authentic encouragement is find any student strength to acknowledge, even if it's something ridiculously trivial. I am telling you, I think it has something to do with this particular generation of students that are in college right now. But if you can give them authentic compliments or encouragement, they really take that and it makes them feel so good about themselves. But again, it has to be genuine. It can't be something that you're like forcing. So if Kim had come to the reference desk with a series of APA citation questions, for instance, and the student, I don't know if this is going to resonate with you, but I hear students say all the time to me, "Oh, I am so dumb. I can't do these friggin' citations that I've tried for 4 years to do, and I'm a senior now. I must be the dumbest person on this college campus." It's not unusual for students to be that hard on themselves. I would say, first of all, you came to the right place. You took the right step to work on these citations. A student who didn't care and just handed in whatever citation drafts they came up with probably wouldn't do as well as you're going to do, because you're asking for help. And then later on, if they do even one part of one citation correctly without me prompting them or something, acknowledge that, right? Wow, that is the best citation for a book chapter I have seen started in a really long time. Even if it's something that seems trivial like that to us, can mean all the world to a student who's trying something new for the first time. And then, positive feedback, as let's say that they're, let's say they've offered up a really good keyword that we can use for the search for a research article. I would say, wow, that is awesome. You know what? I didn't even think about using that particular combination of keywords. I think you're really improving. You're getting this, right? Again, but it has to be authentic, because it can't feel forced, or else the student is going to be like, oh, she's totally lying to make me feel better. Are there any questions so far?
There's one in the chat, I noticed.
Okay, I didn't see that.
Yisra.
Holly, can you read that to me? I can't see it right now because I have my notes covering up the chat box.
I have it. In the case, since failing this class is possible, should the librarian counsel the student to speak to the professor as well?
Absolutely. And in fact, the third R, refer, relates to referring students to other places on campus when they need help that we can't directly provide. But we're going to get to that very shortly. Okay, so strategy 4, identifying cognitive distortions. I could have made a long list of cognitive distortions for you to read over. We all use them, whether we know it or not. I really like Wikipedia's list of cognitive distortions. So on the handout that the link to which I put in the chat box, the words cognitive distortions under strategy 4 on that handout is a link to the Wikipedia page of cognitive distortions. But essentially, they're just irrational thought patterns that we use and perpetuates people believing or perceiving reality inaccurately. So one that I use all the time, I'm just throwing this out here there as an example, is I fall victim to the, well, I don't want to say victim, but I use the it's called all or nothing thinking, or sometimes black and white thinking. I'm not going to exercise today because I only have a half an hour left of free time at lunch. And if I don't have time for a full workout, it doesn't count for anything. That's like my classic cognitive distortion, right? It has to be the full hour or it doesn't count, right? So it takes practice to identify when we're thinking those sort of maladaptive thoughts. But when students do it, it gets easier with practice to identify them. So in the previous role play with Kim, she used some pretty negative thoughts about herself. Oh, Logan wrote, I'm a master at disqualifying the positive. Oh yeah, right. Yeah, we do that all the time. Oh, that one thing I did right doesn't count because I, screwed something else up, right? So we disqualify the positive things that we've done because it's easier for some people to believe negative things about themselves due to childhood or family of origin issues oftentimes. So Kim, do you think you could give me an example where a student is using just any sort of irrational thinking or cognitive distortion?
Yeah, you mean role play with you?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. I don't know how to get these citations correct. I must be the only one who doesn't know this. I think there's something wrong with me. I just cannot remember. I've gone over it over in my head a million times. I think I might really have some problem retaining information. I don't know. I cannot get it. I've tried. I promise you I've tried. There's something wrong.
So in that instance, Kim used about 5 cognitive distortions. The big one, and students use this a lot, is must. The father of the rational emotive behavior therapy, where that cognitive distortions are drawn from, his name was Albert Ellis. He used to say, don't ever use must, right? I must, because who says you must do something? More often than not, it's ourselves. It's not anybody else saying that you must do something. He called that, actually, this is his phrase, not mine. He called it masturbation. And students are experts at that. No pun intended. And then she used the all or nothing thinking, or black and white thinking. You often find that when students use never or always. I never do this right, or I'm always bad at that. All right. So if Kim said, I never do any of this right, I might respond with something like, well, you said you never do any of this right, but you just did that citation elegantly. You just came up with some fantastic keywords there. So from my librarian perspective, I think you're doing a lot of things right. You want to be delicate and about delivering those, we call them reframes, when you turn a something that the client has said that's negative into more of a positive frame. You want to be delicate about it because you don't want it to feel forced, and you don't want to be that like librarian who's constantly pointing out, self-critical things the student's saying to themselves. You really want to do it sort of selectively when it's appropriate, or else again it'll feel forced rather than authentic. How about there's another one called overgeneralization. So in our breakout room, we talked about the overconfident student who thinks the assignment is stupid because they already know everything about their assigned topic. Ideas for handling that angry, overconfident student. I guess I'm not understanding the assignment is stupid because they already know everything about their assigned students who just sort of the know-it-all, who resents the assignment. Okay. The Dunning-Krueger effect. Ooh, Logan, I
can hop in. So that talks about confidence as we start knowing something. And we've all done it. You learn a little bit about something, and then all of a sudden you're the expert. You learn a little bit more, and then it just drops, and you go, I don't know anything. So having Dunning-Krueger in mind is super helpful when you get those super overconfident freshmen.
I just wrote that down to read up on, Logan. Thank you for that. So Holly, when sometimes the best strategy when the student thinks that they know everything and that the assignment is stupid, I just say, you seem really frustrated because this assignment seems like you could do it in your sleep and it feels like busy work to you. And I understand that frustration. I think all of us, including me as the librarian, have felt that, but let's just do some radical acceptance here. You have to do the assignment or else you're going to get a 0 and you're going to fail the class. So you have a choice here whether or not to do it. Let's just try to figure out something that will make it more enjoyable for you. Let's research another aspect to your topic that you could work in that you don't know something about, or something like that. You have to just try and tweak them out of the negative mindset a little bit. And there are some great links that people are putting. I think Logan put in the chat box. Thank you for that, Logan. So just a couple other typical cognitive distortions. I got a C on my rough draft, so I must be a bad student and I'm going to do poorly on this coming assignment. Does anybody want to take a stab at sort of potentially pointing out the cognitive distortion and responding to it with something more positive? I'll wait a couple seconds, and if no one speaks up, I'll do it.
Just want to give you guys your 15 minutes.
Thank you.
Warning. You're welcome.
So I might say, oh, well, your classmates. Do you think a bad student would come to the research help desk? And then inevitably the student's going to say no. And I'll say, well, then from my perspective as a librarian, you're doing exactly what you need to do in order to get a better grade on your final draft, right? They're so inclined to see the negative about themselves that they just don't stop to acknowledge their strengths. And so why not have you do it, right? And quite frankly, sometimes when we acknowledge that things might not be as bad as they seem, it takes the pressure off a little bit. They're not bad because they're having difficulty. Anybody would in that situation. And so, again, they feel less personally flawed. And then my last strategy is when the emotional responses aren't appropriate, because there are students who might not feel comfortable talking about their feelings, or who sometimes you can just tell it's just one of those students who, just isn't going to do feelings, so to speak. Use solution focused techniques. Just, try to solve the problem. Try not to pack in extra information into the reference transaction to get those teachable moments, because when you pack in that extra information, sometimes students are like, eye roll. All I wanted was the call number, right? I don't want to learn how to use, this, that, and the other thing. I just want the call number. So particularly students, some have at this age group, the undergrads and grads, have comparatively poor executive functioning, and they become really easily overwhelmed. So help students set manageable, realistic goals, right? If they're completely overwhelmed because they have 3 assignments due the next day, help them figure out which is the most heavily weighted paper, and then help them come up with a plan for that one, and then say, all right, I will meet you back here at 11:30 tomorrow, and let's come up with more plans.
There's a
Holly, I saw your question about taking the strategies to chat reference. Just as soon as I get through step 5, Holly, if I haven't talked about that, would you remind me? Or Kristen? Okay.
Not a problem.
Thank you. Help them organize the steps that they will need with their research paper. Maybe if they're completely overwhelmed with, what articles they need to find, help them make an outline of the major subjects that they need to cover in their paper. And that leads into helping them find articles on those major sections of the paper. Provide note-taking worksheets, because you should not expect them to memorize what you're saying. I have a pre-prepared note-taking worksheet that I slide across the desk to every student when I'm meeting with them in person. And in the chat virtual world that many of us are in right now, have like a Google Doc link prepared, so you can just pop that link to the Google Doc in the chat box on Zoom, and it'll take the student to a note-taking worksheet. Or maybe a set of instructions for using, PsycInfo database, or take some screen grabs and pop those screen grabs into a Google Doc, and then send that to the student. Oftentimes in the Zoom environment, I tell students, record this reference interview with your phone. I don't have a problem with that. And so that you can refer back to that recording when it's time for you to do your research.
Do you have a copy of your note-taking worksheet to share, or could you possibly tell us what's on it?
Yes, it's just like there's a section at the top that says, tips. And then the next section on the worksheet says steps. And then the third section of the worksheet, and I give some pre-prepared lines. It was like next steps. And I often actually hand those pre-prepared worksheets out that I tweak sometimes also for our one-shot BI sessions. Because then the students, when it comes time later on in the semester for them to actually do the research, they have their notes jotted down. So let's see. Sometimes students need to have their attention focused because they daydream, or they're anxious, and so they're kind of being inattentive. Ask them questions, because bringing their attention back to the task at hand really helps them focus on what they need to complete things. You could help them set reminder alarms in their phones, or ask them to jot down a few notes in their planners if they have a paper one. But if nothing else seems to be working, you can use the immediacy I keep bringing up. So I might say to a student, in this moment, it seems like you still need something else that we haven't touched upon. How can I be helpful to you right now? Is there something else that I can be doing? It is okay to ask. And then a lot of good conversations come out of that sort of asking, you know, I still feel like you're not really settled right now. What else can I do? Those open-ended questions are very useful. And then the last couple minutes I want to, before I get to questions, is refer. That's the third R. We need to talk about safety briefly. You can't be everything to everyone. It's really important to maintain appropriate boundaries with students to make sure that they understand that you're a librarian, you're not their professor, you're not the learning center. If the student has come to you for information about a sort of a campus issue rather than a library issue, refer them to the appropriate office. Write down the operating hours and the contact information. Encourage that contact with other offices on campus, like the Learning Center, or at our SUNY Plattsburgh campus, we have writing tutors and we have academic personal trainers who essentially teach students study skills. You know, there's subject-based tutoring. Making those connections helps students to feel supported when you're not around and when it's not your role on campus. One time a student came to the reference desk and was just crying, and I was like, you know, what's going on? This doesn't seem library related. And she was scared of going to financial aid to ask about a problem all by herself. So I walked her there. Like, it took me 3 minutes, and I probably helped that student more in the 3-minute walk over to, you know, financial aid than, you know, sitting in the chair at the reference desk. And that student became like a lifelong patron of the library until she graduated. But if a student is particularly agitated, never, ever, ever put yourself at risk. Call university police if you think that a student is having a crisis of some kind, because there is a correlation. I mean, it's not all the time, but there's a correlation between emotional distress and suicidality. So you have to be familiar with campus response systems if you're at the reference desk. If you ever hear students using warning phrases like hopeless, trapped, no way out, you know, purposeless, or if they even refer in an offhand manner to or make light of completing suicide, you need to ask them directly if they're having thoughts about killing themselves. Or you could say something like, you know, I'm hearing you use words like hopeless, and that makes me feel a little scared because hopeless means something serious sometimes. How about we call the psych services office together and get you an appointment? Because if you're feeling hopeless, you know, I want to make sure that you're safe. Or walk them to university police or psych services. And just to dispel the myth, asking whether a student is suicidal or having suicidal ideation will not make a person suicidal. Most people who complete suicide do not keep their plans to themselves, and it's better to be safe than sorry, and to refer a student to the appropriate campus services when you have that sort of concern. And don't be sworn to secrecy, because you don't want that responsibility, and it is a liability issue. So in terms of secrecy, that brings up one last thought that I have, which is about ethics. Privacy is admittedly one of the cornerstones of the library profession. However, there's a distinction between confidentiality and privacy on college campuses. College personnel can offer privacy, but almost no offices on campus can offer complete confidentiality, because confidentiality is a legal obligation, whereas privacy is just a moral one. Okay. So, if you think a student is suicidal and you have to lurk in order to, get the student's name, and I had to do this once, then you might have to do that to save their life. And Ed Law says that we can do that. So at this point, we are down to the questions section. So does anybody have any questions for me or Kim?
Jump back to the other one. Do you have any particular thoughts about talking these strategies into chat reference? Because I'm sure we're all chatting, we're all on Zoom.
So we do do chat reference. I try, if a student is using chat reference, usually they're asking sort of a shorter reference question. We categorize our reference questions into brief and in-depth. And those brief reference questions sometimes don't offer opportunities to get into the sort of hand-holding, emotionally focused strategies. But in those in-depth, if an in-depth transaction has come in as a brief transaction, I try to move the transaction over into Zoom. I prefer doing in-depth reference face-to-face anyway, whether it's in person or via Zoom. So maybe have like your, when you go into a reference transaction, have your like Zoom office link ready so that you can hop over into Zoom if it's turned into something that needs a little bit longer, sort of enhanced reference. April said that she actually had one of those suicidal students and it was scary. It is scary. It is really scary. I had a student who was depersonalized. This was the student who I lurked to get their name. They were depersonalizing. They walked up to me at the research help desk and asked me what they looked like. And I was like, huh? And they were like, because right now when I look in the mirror, all I see is a hunk of meat. And I was like, wow, the student needs immediate help, but they disappeared before I could get their name, but they hadn't logged off their computer. So I got their name and I called psych services and I was like, you need to get a wellness check going on the student immediately. So other questions. Oh, Kristen said she moves them from chat to Zoom too, and that they never say no unless they're in class. True, Kristen. I've only had one student once say no.
They miss the interaction just as much. And I find that it's much more personable when they're there looking at you.
Yes.
I just want to echo that. I'll blame myself to get them over to Zoom if I need to. Like, I can't understand this quite well. It would really help me if I could see your screen. Can you help me out here? And then that puts them in a position of power. So that they can then connect. And then as soon as you see them,
yes,
their whole body relaxes.
Yes. Absolutely. Thank you, Logan. Logan, you might have a second career,
I will say I have
world.
been in CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, for like 4 years now.
Awesome.
I highly recommend it if you're a person whose mind plays tricks on them. And so it helps me at least recognize when my brain is going down the least helpful path. It doesn't mean that it'll find the right path, but I can at least say, like, this is my brain right now, and I know my brain's doing this, and it's probably not right.
Logan, thank you. Same here. I'm the queen of what's called personalization. Oh, that person's being curt, so I must have done something wrong to deserve it because I'm flawed inherently underneath. I mean, those are the irrational thoughts. I put my email address in the chat box, oharaea@plattsburgh.edu, in case anybody ever wants to chat about these ideas or practice, or, maybe even collaborate on something, because getting people interested in this topic, I think is going to be key to kind of rethinking how we do reference, on a general or wider scale. Someone wrote, have you found that this attention to student emotions takes a lot more time? No, because most of the time, it's just a couple extra sentences at the start of a transaction. Like, hey, Holly, thanks for coming to the reference desk. What can I do for you? And you're like, oh, I'm so stressed out. And I'm like, oh, you're stressed. Let's take a minute and we'll talk about why you're stressed. Maybe we'll take a breath together. I mean, it really only takes an extra, 30 seconds to inquire why the student's feeling so stressed and to figure out from that information how I can help more. Let's see. Other questions? So then I'm just going to remind people that, try what you want to try. If something doesn't feel comfortable for you, if you don't think it would feel authentic coming from you, don't do it. You don't have to do any of these things. But if the situation presents itself, maybe give it a whirl, because certainly it can't hurt. Anything that we can do to help students feel more comfortable with, their assignments, with their classes, with coming to the library, certainly is going to encourage repeat business. And again, I can't stress this enough. That's what we want right now in this budget climate. We want repeat business so that we can show the stakeholders on our campuses, hey, the number of reference transactions has gone up recently. And let's talk about staffing, or, let's talk about reference desk hours, or let's, talk about expanding X, Y, or Z services. Could we, should we, sorry, I'm reading a note from Holly. Could we, should we, as a profession, start capturing this emotional work as part of the reference transaction? Hells yeah, Holly, quite frankly, to be folksy about it. Yes. If we start making it a standard practice, and, it's only going to bolster our efficacy collectively at the reference desk. Oh, and Rajni said, it should be okay to ask another librarian to step in if we feel we're not equipped. Absolutely. I have a colleague who very frequently says, I can't deal with the hand holding. I just can't do it. I'm not that person. And then, so if one of the students that I've worked with previously, who I know is very tentative about research and very kind of beset with cognitive distortions, she'll just hand over that student to me. She'll call me in my office, even if it's not my shift at the RHD or research help desk, and say, can you come down? Or I'll say, more often than not, send the student up to my office. I'm happy to work with them. And Logan, you are absolutely right. The emotional labor of librarianship. That is such a good phrase. Logan, off the top of your head, do you have any literature that you can suggest in the chat box on the emotional labor of librarianship? And I'm jotting that phrase.
Yeah, I'll throw some in there. I did a quick Google Scholar search and Matheson came up. I know Given has done some work. Sorry, I'm a doc student doing their dissertation, so these are all like fresh in my head, and I think in terms of academic journal articles. So sorry for all of you that don't.
I told him to
I can
start a
pop some stuff
blog,
in.
just so everyone knows. I said, Logan, start a blog, because we'll all read everything you suggest.
But then I'd have to have time to write the blog, and my advisor would yell at me.
Maybe you can use the blog as a way to work out rough drafts of chapters.
There we go. Now I'm starting my own preprint server.
Love it.
I was thinking about writing up some of these ideas for something like reference and user services quarterly, but I never seem to actually get myself in gear to, I've even started the article. I just never Finish it. Molly, I see you wrote about talking about library anxiety with your students in the information science department. That is absolutely fantastic. So you're laying some of that foundational work for future librarians. If you ever want to go over any ideas with me, Molly, feel free to shoot me an email, okay?
I would love to. So yes, thank you. That'd be great.
Yeah, and you've got my email address.
I think so, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Oh, and Holly wrote, "We know you can do it, Elin." Thank you, Holly. Oh, any other questions or comments? Modeling. Holly wrote modeling. Yes. Yes. That's actually another very, very key counseling technique, modeling. So I guess I'm just gonna, my last comment is you have the handout link in the chat box. So make sure to save that if you want, so you have that ready, you know, the next time you're providing reference services. And please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or you just want to chat about some of the ideas. So, oh, and Logan put the...
I put the search I did and then a specific article that I've read about instruction. It's not reference, but it's related.
Awesome.
Yeah, Logan will just keep going.
Yes.
And we love him for it.
Yeah, we do.
And you also loved that you can walk away from that.
Or just click you off. Yes, I can.
You are the best, Logan. Seriously.
I can honestly say I have not felt the need to tell you to shut up once today.
Awesome.
And that, yeah, I would say that
progress in our relationship over
it's a long-standing thing that happens between April and I. When she says shut up, I hear, I like you as a person.
That's got to be April Davies, right?
Yeah.
April, yeah.
Thanks. I don't know if it's good or bad to be that well known.
No, I recognized your voice.
This was great. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Holly.
Elin would have time to write her articles, but I keep assigning her work. Sorry.
What happens when you're competent? They give you more work.
That's right.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, that is the Dean of Feinberg of LITS at SUNY Plattsburgh. Wave, Holly.
Thanks.
All right. So I guess that's it. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thanks, Joyce. I appreciate your comment.
Here, I'll hold up the Bronco for anyone who's playing the home game. For those who stayed way till the last minute.
Bye, Logan, and everybody.
Thanks, Elin. This was great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jocelyn.
My pleasure. So poster presentations will be held in this room at 4:30.